Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 304. Today we're going to talk about Thunder Alley. This is a new release for GMT Games. Came out just a little bit before Gen Con, and if you've watched any other reviews about it, everybody is raving about it. I don't know that that's really going to change too much for me, but before I kind of spoil too much more of the review, let me jump into how it plays. I will give a chance to talk about some of the different player counts and how the game does change, basically from 2 to 7. I haven't played exactly a player count. I've played 2, 3, 4, and 7. I haven't played 5 or 6. So I do have experience with 2-player and 7-player and kind of in between. Anyway, let's jump into how the game works, and I'll come back and say what I think. Now you can see here I have the game set up for a 3-player game. There are 2 maps or racetracks in the game. There are 2 boards, I should say. Each of these is double-sided. So here we have Hollinger's Pyramid, which I'm told actually mirrors a track not in New Jersey but in Pennsylvania. I don't know anything about that. But now we have 3 players. If we take a look here, we have 3 teams of cars. We have the pink team, the red team, and the yellow team. And these were randomly determined just by my whim. But normally what you do is you'll flip one of these cards here, and then you'll work down the order in this case. So in this case, yellow would have been first, followed by pink, and then red. So anytime you need to sort of randomly determine a team to get the brunt, usually of some event card or some other random thing, then you use the card. You just flip over a card here, sort of up front style. Now you can see here the staggered placement of cars. So it goes pink, red, yellow, and then in reverse yellow, red, pink, and so on all the way back through. And a 3-player game, you're going to have 5 cars in each team, and each player is going to get a little player sheet in their color. So for the Princess Racing team here, the pink team, then we're going to be able to track damage and maybe lap leading awards and things won by the different cars. So you can see here's the 23 car, and if it takes any damage here, we're going to go ahead and put some damage on there. Now there's 2 types of damage. You have big ones here. These are permanent markers. You can never get rid of those. And then you have these little piddly ones here. These are temporary markers. These you can remove by pitting. Now the game is card driven. Now each player is going to get cards equal to the number of cards they have plus 1. So in this case, players will get 6 cards per round, and you're going to play until everybody's played 5 cards, at which point you can choose to keep the remaining card or discard it. And in either case, you're going to draw back up to 6 cards. Now there's several different things to note about the cards. There's different types of movement. There's also the movement points. So if you've got 7 movement points, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. If you ever have to push into anybody laterally, that'll cost you 2 movement points to push them, laterally. Now if I wanted to be the red car in this case and push laterally on pink, what that'll do is actually shove everybody else back, and that'll still cost you 2 movement points out of maybe, in this case 7 that you used. Now if you're ever going to push forward, it's going to cost you 3 movement points to do so. However, there is draft movement, there's lead movement, and there's pursuit movement. In this case here, you have lead movement. This is actually going to drag cars along. Draft movement will work front and back, and let me explain that in a little bit more detail. So first, let's take a look at a lead movement card, and I'll kind of describe the different parts of the card as well here. So first you have the movement points, and you have a big number and a little number. The big number is the one you're mostly going to be using, but if you're in here inside the apron and you're pitting and you're coming out of the pit, then you're going to look at the little number and basically ignore the rest of the card. If we look here, we have a type of damage. So if I play this card, I'm going to activate here, let's say the 23 car. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to flip it over, and that's going to be activated for the round. So I can never play a card activating that car, but it could get moved around, based on the actions of other cards I play or other players play. So I'm going to play that, but if we look back here, we can notice there is a little tire symbol. So in that case, the 23 will take one of these temporary damage markers. You can see that's a little marker, and whenever you play that. So some of the better cards are going to cause some more damage. Most of the cards cause some kind of damage to get you to try to pit during the game. Now the next 2 things to notice about the card is the type of movement as well as the special effect. So we have different types of movement: lead, draft, pursuit, solo, and then there's a special one I want to talk about. But you always have that type, and then there'll be different versions of that where you can have a little special effect. It'll tell you to do a certain thing. Maybe lateral movement will be free. You've got to try to end close to the wall. So it's kind of representing different driving techniques. So I'm not going to go into all the special effects, but those are definitely things that you want to keep in mind. Let's just talk about the movement types. Now lead movement is what it sounds like. If I were to activate the 23 car, basically at the instant of activation, or anytime I do get in front of somebody, I'm going to link up with everybody behind me, and I'm going to pull them along 7 spaces. Well, if you look at it in this case, if I've got a lead movement with the 23, I'm going to move him 7 spaces as well as everybody else, including my other pink car, so that's pretty nice. However, if I had activated the number 5, then I would have pulled himself in 2 other pink cars. Unfortunately, there's 2 cars in front of him, so it doesn't really make sense to do that. But that is something you want to consider. You maybe will bump somebody out of the way and then do the movement and so on. So you're looking at the positioning of all of the cars when you play these activations, as well as the cars for the other players, because you don't want to help them too much either. So again, lead movement is basically linking and pulling everybody behind you. Now, pursuit movement is kind of the opposite. You're basically pushing everybody in front of you. And in this case, you might play this on this back car here. If you're playing pink, you'd play 53, and you're going to push everybody in front of it 7 spaces. And in that case, you're not paying the 3 movement penalty because you're playing that particular type of movement. So it's kind of like a reverse draft or reverse lead movement where you're pushing everybody along with you. And again, in this case, you would take another tire damage for that car. The next type of card here is drafts movement, and that is moving the cars in front of you and behind you. Now, the reason to show this card is interesting of note. The active car may make no lateral movement, because normally on a typical draft card, you could actually sort of get yourself in a position to pull more cars. So what you might do, if you were the pink guy here, is you may push over, use the 2 movement, shove everybody back, and then pull everybody with you like so. So you're going to pull 4 of your pink cars in that case, leaving this guy behind, but maybe that's a risk you would take. But this car here says the active car may make no lateral movement, so you can't do that. Now, the thing about draft movement and pursuit movement is you can do a little bit of maneuvering before you start your forward movement, and the instant you start your forward movement is when the link is going to take place. Whereas if you do lead, anytime there's somebody behind you, you're going to be dragging them along with you, so you have a little bit less flexibility in terms of that. So you're going to be playing these 3 types of cards most of the time, trying to sort of bump in and out and, you know, pull most cars with you, maybe negotiating with other players, especially at higher player counts, to help each other out. Then we've got solo movement here, and that is exactly what it sounds like. You basically can go, you know, all by yourself. You're not linked up with anybody. It's a good way to maybe catch back up to a pack, to sort of get involved in any drafting that might happen. But there's also a special kind of solo movement card, and this is the clean air, excuse me. If the active car is alone in a sector after using the forward movement and is not the overall lead card, it may move forward any number of sectors as long as it doesn't enter the sector on the track. That basically means adjacent to a car. So if you get this guy here way behind, for example, then that's nice to save those clear air cars, because he's just going to get lapped most likely if he's all by himself back there. But if you play that clear air, you can basically catch him up to get to be back with the pack. So these are very important cards to save just in case. And as you can see here, we have a lap indicator. Now this particular track says 3 laps. There's no reason you couldn't play 1 lap or 2 laps or 4 laps or whatever you wanted with this track. This is kind of the suggested amount. You're going to play a certain number of laps, and then whoever finishes first is going to get more points. Now if you see here, the first place player is going to grab this trophy. So the first guy across the finish line is going to get 46 points. And then the next player was going to get 42, 41, all the way down to 21st place. So there's a little bit of a drop off here, but then it's kind of a gradual point descent there. But you're trying not just to win the race with 1 car, but get as many cars as you can, you know, in the top end of the pack. Now after each player has played the cards they're going to play for that round, you're going to figure out who the turn leader is, and this is going to give you 1 point at the end of the game there. And then whichever car has the most of these is going to get an additional point for having the most, you know, being in the lead the most turns. Now if anybody's been lapped, you can use these markers here to keep that in mind. So let's say you know, yellow was back here, they've been lapped, and then the leader had just passed it with the current leader. At the end of the round, if anybody still has this lapped marker on here, it's going to be removed from the game, and this is going to take the lowest available you know, place marker there. But before you do that, I'm getting ahead of myself. You're going to resolve an event card, and there's several event cards in here actually, and these are going to probably make or break the game for some folks. These can be pretty random, but it is sort of NASCAR racing, so you can do different things with these. Some of these will be green flag, you can see red flags, and there's also yellow flags somewhere. There's one. And so these are going to be just different crazy conditions: sun on the track, you know, loose. Some of these are going to look at the car that has the most of a certain type of token, maybe give you a permanent token of of that sort or have you do something else. Some of these yellow ones are going to cause a restart and have the players basically stack up. You know, maybe there's been a pile up or something, and so you know, even though if you get guys left behind, you know, the more laps you play, the more chances are they're going to have a reset and they'll be back in there trying to draft and all that stuff. Now, depending if it was a green flag or a red flag, or excuse me, yellow flag, you're going to have different styles of pitting. Now, if it's a green flag, you've got to move over to the apron and then go back 5 spaces. Or if it's yellow flag, you kind of all stack up real closely to each other and then kind of come back out, so you can't actually stack on people. That's an interesting thing to think about, and it's a big part of the game, because as you start to accrue the damage markers on your card here, especially if you have more laps, you may have a guy that you've really pushed very, very hard with some of these bigger movements and activated some cards, but as they start to accrue damage, you're going to actually start to slow yourself down. So if we look at the chart here, if you have a couple of tokens on you, it's not a big deal, but once you get 3 tokens, then you actually reduce the total speed of the car. And then once you get 6 tokens, then you'll have to eliminate that car from the race. So, you know, permanent markers you can't do anything about, but the temporary markers you're going to have to really consider pitting, and you may have to sort of, you know, drop back a place or 3 if you decide to pit. So that is the basic gist of how to play Thunder Alley. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview. As I said at the beginning, I have played it at 2, 3, 4, and 7, and the game does change up quite a bit across all of those player counts. You know, I haven't played 5 and 6, but I expect the gradation of negotiation versus tactics is pretty similar. So the game actually plays really well. It's a 2-player game, which I was actually surprised about. You know, each player has, gosh, I forget, I think like 7 or 8 cars. They use, no, 6 cars, because they use all their cars. And then, you know, so there's a little bit of interesting sort of back and forth trying to get, you know, a nice chunk of your cars to sort of break away from the pack and get out into a big lead and gobble up those first couple of positions. So it's very interesting, very cool as a 2-player game. You know, not my favorite. I think my favorite is probably in the 3 and 4 range. Now with 7, I'll get to 3 and 4 in a second. With 7, it's too many players for me. Now it's still fun. You know, I actually posted a video at Gen Con and we played a 7-player game of it, and it was interesting. It was cool. You know, we were all friends, and so we had a good time, and we were negotiating and cajoling and trying to, you know, wheel and deal to help each other, which apparently in NASCAR is something that happens, you know, not only within your own team, but across teams, to sort of, hey, let's draft for a little bit, you know, then I'll help you, you help me, and then you screw the guy over and you put him in the wall and then you fly by him. So it's interesting in that case. It took us about 2 hours. We had to teach 1 player. All of us had played beforehand, but it was still fun. It was like a nice party game, and then the events are cool, you know, because they kind of just change everything up. But it's not something I really look forward to playing, you know, as a 7-player game. I think my limit probably is 5. Now, having said that, with 3 and 4 player is easily the best, because the 2 players a little bit sort of, not tug of war, but it's like, you know, back and forth and push and pull without that sort of extra dynamic of a 3rd and a 4th player to sort of mix things up and, you know, aha, you guys were trying to work together, now I'm going to do this, and now we rearrange the negotiating table and the terms are now different. So that's really cool with that. But I do like the car-driven racing and the whole team racing idea. It's very new, it's very different. You know, most of the racing games I've played, like, you know, Formula D and Rallyman and that kind of stuff, is, you know, 1 car and you're trying to, you know, just win with 1 car. In those games, somebody can get kind of far ahead, where it's like, okay, we know he's going to win, so we're just kind of playing it out, we're playing for 2nd place. Whereas this, that has the events that come into play. It has the sort of the randomness of the card draw and the tactician or tactility or whatever of the cards, that it's going to keep the game kind of loosey-goosey, and you can't have comebacks and you know come from behind types of things. You know, you've got to, you maybe will leave a guy behind and he gets kind of pushed back with another pack of people that basically pull him all the way up, and you kind of help them, you know, try to get to a respectable place. You know, meanwhile you're really focusing on your front leader. So there's a nice, you know, balance there with that type of thing. And as I said, the events can reset everything. You know, you could be way in the lead and we're going into the the third and final lap, and you know there's a yellow flag event and resets everybody, and we're all sort of bunched up, and now you've really got to pit, and because you know you're not going to really be able to activate your guys, so you've pitted, and then we pass you up a little bit, and then you sort of get back on there. So you can have very, you know, I don't know, catastrophic, depending on when it happens and where the positions are, you know, the yellow flags come up and really hose you over. So you've got to expect that, you know, even smart card play and good tactics isn't always going to win you the race, but you know, it is what it is. I think that's thematic because NASCAR is sort of a cluster in terms of racing. You know, the crazy events and random people winning, and you just go around in circles the whole time. But anyway, as I said in the subtitle, I don't like NASCAR at all. If you had to choose for racing, it'd probably be rally racing because you've got sort of terrain to deal with, and sort of variability in that way, and then also like Formula One, like Monte Carlo style type stuff in the streets. I enjoy that because that's very interesting to me. I just think it looks cool too. But I really like this game. I mean, you know, I don't hate NASCAR that much. I do, but I'm just not trying to piss anybody off because, you know, it's not a big deal. But even though I dislike it and I never watch it, I really enjoy playing this game. So that really says a lot, I think, about the game. And that's kind of the important takeaway point with that is, you know, it has a lot of new stuff. The card play, the events are really cool, even though they couldn't swing the balance. You got the team, you know, racing, all that good stuff. And it really is going to fit nicely in that 3, 4, 5 player range where you have some tactics, a little bit of negotiation, and a little bit of bumping and grinding and trying to work your way into good positions. But still plays pretty good too, and it's all right with 7, you know. So anyway, so take a look at Thunder Alley. You know, they're kind of flying off the shelves from what I've been told, but I just checked actually because I was a little worried that I'd be posting a review. And there's no games available, but there is some. So if you see what you see, then go get it because they're probably going to be off the shelves for a few months shortly. We'll see. All right.